Woohoo! Hello.
Hey everyone.
Wow, we are 3 people. So Brad is here with me and Aditya joined today, which is super cool. Aditya, do you like to introduce yourself? But I think a lot of people know you already from the Hono Discord and from your engagement with Hono.
Yeah, but I guess people do know me about my Hono rate limiter and Hono OpenAPI most of the time, but I'm also in the Discord server helping others sort of navigate all the Hono goodness there is to know about, and also helping them figure out all the issues they're having. So yeah, mostly I guess I love sort of contributing to Hono most of the time. That's a really great library. And uh, if you want to know more about Hono or have any issues regarding that, hit me up in the Discord server. I'll be there to help you out. Yeah.
That's cool. I think you already answered one of my questions back when I started with Hono, I remember. And I guess Brad also had some questions you answered when he started, right?
Oh yeah, that's well. I have questions relating to some of our first conversations back last year, but I'll save those for later. But yeah, I will say Aditya was super helpful in the Discord and remains so. And I thought it was amazing. Like, could kind of hop into this framework and then like immediately, talk to someone. Yeah, I don't know. That was just like the really nice part to me. It feels actually like a good, healthy developer community. Yeah.
We try to do that.
I also have to confess, we met like 10 minutes early and we talked about other things and not about how we want to structure the call or the stream. So, I mean, if Brad would not have said we should go live in 5 seconds, we would have been still in the backstage. So
Still talking about
trains and other things and restaurants basically. But
yeah.
I was wondering, I think you mentioned it already, you're known for Hono OpenAPI. Should we jump into some code to look how that looks like? I have some of it open in my IDE I can share. And maybe then we can naturally start a conversation around it. And probably you will also spot, maybe there's things that I did wrong. Let's see. I don't know.
Well, real quick, just maybe to frame it a little bit. So like, why does Hono OpenAPI exist? So like, what brought you to the point of like, oh, I'm going to build a library? Yeah, that's the question. Why does this thing exist?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the honest answer is I was lazy. That's a nice way to put this. But the main thing was like I had this API with like hundreds of endpoints and also legacy API. So I was kind of in the middle of migrating my old server to Hono, because why not? So yeah, and like there was like sometime during that sprint, it was more like my front end team wasn't able to keep up with the API updates, and it was clear that we needed something like OpenAPI and all that. And I like started looking for how I can start integrating it in Hono. So it turns out like before Hono OpenAPI, it was quite a pain to sort of rewrite all the APIs into a different syntax so that you can get the OpenAPI. And here's the thing: I really don't want to do that. Not just because I was lazy, but also because I had a working thing, and migrating the whole code base into something different would have been like may introduce a lot of challenges, and also I really don't want to do that with the API. So I kind of start digging in and like, what is OpenAPI? Like how the specs are being created. Maybe I can automate it in some way. And it turns out that we have already wrote the basic structure of the OpenAPI with our validators, because like, let's be honest, OpenAPI just comprises of 3 things: your responses, your params, and all sort of paths that you have, like the validations you have for them, and the description and the tagging for that routes. And in my code base, we are already doing validation for all the routes, like the params that I'm getting, the query and everything. I just needed a way to kind of figure out how I can abstract this out and use this to build that open API. Honestly, initially my plan was just to sort of write that manually, but it slowly evolved that it cannot be possible, and also like do something with the current structure only. Uh, and slowly it evolved into the idea of Hono OpenAPI, that sort of a library which sort of connects with your validators, like hook it somehow and abstract the validations and convert it into an OpenAPI spec. And honestly, like once like it was released, and back in November, it was an amazing response from the community regarding this, because I did sort of figure out that people were facing this issue with the open API part of Hono. Like they really wanted to get into it, but there was no easy way of doing that. Like I met a lot of guys who were dealing with that. And honestly, you can just go into the Hono middleware's repo and just search like Zod open API issues. And there are like quite a lot, because it's something, you have to wrap your head around that syntax.
Yes.
For the Hono Open API, my base idea was that I don't want to make any change in the code base. It should be like dead simple. And the happiest moment was when I just sort of, find and replace all the lines of validators into Hono Open API validators, and it was done. I was like, yeah, that is something that I've created. It is really nice for everyone.
All right. So if I kind of summarize this, it's kind of like a philosophy of incremental adoption, right? Like versus, okay, so 2 episodes ago we talked a little bit about validation middleware, which was nice. We dug into that, and then we started talking about we talked about Hono Zod OpenAPI, which is the specific extension of Hono for building OpenAPI APIs. And that is like that's a different extension of Honos. That's not even, it is Hono, but it's Hono with bells and whistles. Whereas Hono OpenAPI, your thing, is more about, you already have validation. So you've already taken the steps that are close to your spec, and it's just a matter of filling in some other missing data to get the spec. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, exactly. Like the main idea behind this was it should not add a cognitive load of writing a different syntax in Hono, because if you have written Hono Zod Open API like use that package, it's completely different than using Hono. Like the whole structuring of how you add middlewares, of how do you define your security and everything, it's very different, and it's not Hono. That's why like it has a separate classes, and it has a separate set of issues with it. With the Hono Open API, the base idea remains the same, that it is equivalent to what you are writing in Hono. So like the validators are exactly the same. Like you don't have to really write it like Z validators if you want. You can just use that validator-ish. But the thing behind that is like when you are writing those API, you should not have that load of you also need to write the Open API part of this. It's automatically done for you. So that's something that I like to do with that, and I guess I did it quite well with this.
Did you start with which validation did you start with? Did you already had in mind that you want to support multiple, or did you pick one like that you had maybe in your code base already?
Yeah, so Zod was the dominant one. Like I believe Zod is the dominant validation library in JavaScript ecosystem. But like I do had my eyes on the Validbot stuff. Like it was also nice to have that into the code base. So initially when I launched the Hono Open API, it was just related to these 3 validations: Zod, Validbot, and TypeBox. So I just like sort of gone through all the Hono validators that we have. So like the third-party integrations that we have, and I sort of figure out like, okay, these 3 should be the main focus of my library as of right now, like with the initial launch. But like once it was live, like people got crazy regarding this and wanted to like, okay, we need ArkType, we need effect.ts, and there's another issue going on with Typea to have that also. And I'm like, okay, it wasn't a good decision to sort of recreate all those validators in my library. So yeah, I need to figure that part out. But the response from the community is amazing regarding this, and I love that, honestly. And the whole ecosystem is growing slowly.
That's super cool. I mean, I have the IDE open, and maybe we I don't know if that makes sense because I can't see you when I have the IDE open, but maybe, briefly explain what you mentioned here, right? What we can see as well is that you have your response schema maybe, or a schema that you define as as sort. And then what it does really nicely is you can add with your library basically describe root. And then this will take care of the OpenAPI documentation basically, and also takes in the the schemas that you have defined. And I think I like to work with it because what you mentioned earlier, if you use sort OpenAPI, you really have to change the application structure. Just want to make sure that we make use of the IDE code here.
Question from the audience. Something I've had on my to-do list to check was okay. So there, when you describe the route, you can ask it to validate responses. And what does that do? I think.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, there was some issues regarding this. Like people wanted to validate the responses they are sending to the users. So that's something that I never did, but people wanted to do that. So that's a capability that we can use. So if you have passed a validator, like a resolver, so that we can validate that stuff. So we have got the validation schema. We can just use that to validate all the responses that we are sending to the users. Hopefully, I'm answering correctly. Yeah,
I think so. So does that mean at runtime, when your response goes back to a user, if the response data is not valid, then an error is thrown?
Yeah, it will just throw an error. So that it's up to you. How do you want to handle that? You can have an on error handler on the root of your app, which can deal with that. Or you can pass a custom validation object. The error object that what error number and the message that you want to send to the user.
Okay, cool. That was thank you. That was I meant to play with that more before we started, but I ran out of time. Okay. All right. We're looking at the route description. Are we missing anything critical here? We have a schema described for the incoming payload. We specify it inside describe route. And then how are we exposing the spec? That might be a good way to, there might be interesting things to say about this. So when
yeah, please
go for it.
So in this, the describe route is just a handler which sort of, so here's the thing, if you can sort of imagine this, all the validators in Hono, all the middlewares in Hono are anonymous function. So there is a capability so that you can just figure out all the routes and all the middlewares you have in your application. So that's nice to have. But the issue with that is all of them are anonymous functions. So there's no way to identify which one you need to pick to get the validations and the informations regarding that. So each of these functions, so the describe route and the validators, are basically a function, it is basically a function which just store these values or maybe do the validation for you, but it has an extra thing that sort of hooks into that function. So it's like an property through which I'm able to identify okay, this is the thing that I want to sort of take out from these validators or these middlewares. And using that, I can just go through all the schemas, the specs that you have given over here, or the schemas that you have given, all of that, and sort of create that OpenAPI specs. So if you go a bit down, there's this function which takes in the app. So whatever app you have defined. So any route, if there's OpenAPI.json route, this one. So you have to pass the app to get, so that it can extract all of those middlewares and the routes handler from it. If you have described any route after that, so in this case, it's FP route, that will not be sort of part of the OpenAPI specs because it has limited itself to there only. So this is the basic general idea of how it's happening behind the scenes.
We also got questions coming in from the comments. So let's see here. Laurinas asked about, okay, so Hono OpenAPI doesn't necessarily show a type error if responses are not exhaustive. And he's wondering if if that is due to inherent architectural differences between the extended, Hono Zod OpenAPI that we mentioned earlier, and this kind of incremental approach.
Yeah, so that is exactly that issue, because here we are more playing with the Hono's architecture in place of recreating that in a separate way. Because of that, like Hono doesn't have like I cannot sort of like as of right now, like haven't found a way to sort of specify that the handler of this route should give this response in any way. So that's something that I'm still trying to figure it out, and that's one of the requests that many have mentioned regarding this. But once we kind of figure it out, we can add that. But right now, we don't have that because it's just middlewares that's working together.
Okay, so we're going to go just slightly deep on this because I'm curious, like, in your view, is this a limitation of the way that Hono's type system works right now? And then a side question to this is, like, do you see a path to this, or is this going to require like larger changes in Hono itself in order to support that kind of functionality?
Honestly, I haven't thought about that. Like it is something that I haven't able to figure out with Hono. So because Hono sort of add those types in a chain. So like if you have seen the code of like how Hono routes works, you will understand like, okay, basically it's like a chain of types which are being shared between the next middleware. So like by that, what I'm able to understand is like if you have a middleware that is adding some sort of setting some environmental variables or anything like that, that can be passed down to the next handler. But there's no way to sort of make the next handler fixed that you have to give a response like this.
Yeah.
It could be like I'm not that great in TypeScript, or maybe it's a Hono limitations. Both options are on the table over here.
Okay, cool. Thank you for answering the question from the audience.
Happy to.
Okay, so I have kind of another question that I hinted. I hinted towards this question at the beginning. So one of the first things that you told me was the difficulty of writing tooling for Hono is not necessarily in like the logic of the tool itself, but it comes down to cross-platform support. So Hono can run almost anywhere, and so a lot of your first issues will be this doesn't work on Bun, this doesn't work on Dino. So I am curious, you've been working in Hono for a while, and then you developed Hono OpenAPI, which again has quite a large surface area of like what you said of. So you support 5 different validation libraries, and I'm wondering how you stay sane managing, that kind of like fan out effect of having to support different libraries, and any sort of like development practices that you kind of internalize from working with Hono for this library specifically.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So like there are like
a long
2-3
question.
questions.
I'm so sorry. Basically, how do you stay sane trying to support 5 different validation libraries? That's basically the question.
Honestly, like most of the heavy lifting is already done by honestly, I'm just sort of proxying the validator that is already there, right?
Okay.
And I kind of cheated, so I copied all the types and directly placed it on the validator. So that's something that I didn't do, and that was really how I stay sane with this. But yeah, like adding more validators does add a cost to this whole process, because it's about how are we going to convert a schema to like a validation schema to OpenAPI specs. That's one of the issues that Hono OpenAPI have, because in Zod there is a library by like Zod OpenAPI. I have added it in the credits if you want to check it out. it's basically what it does is it takes the validation and spits out like OpenAPI specs for that validation. In case of all the other validating libraries, so those are comparatively quite newer to the ecosystem. I guess Validbot just released their version 1. So the ecosystem around them hasn't been created. So they don't have like a to OpenAPI converter. They do have like a to JSON converter. So like the JSON schema. So what is happening is like I'm taking that JSON schema and sort of converting that JSON schema into OpenAPI spec. So the good news is like the OpenAPI spec 3.1 kind of resembles similar stuff from the JSON schema. So that's a good thing. But still there are like small, you can say properties that are not one-to-one related. So we have to change that. And in some cases, it's kind of, the major issue is like in Validbot, you cannot add metadata into that. Okay. So I cannot refer anything or maybe add a description about this property, things like that. But we have an open issue live on the Hono OpenAPI as well as on the Validbot. I'm working with the Validbot team to sort of have a metadata action created for specifically for OpenAPI, which will be a great addition, not just to Hono OpenAPI, but in general, if anyone wants to build an OpenAPI library around Validbot. So that's a really good thing. And I believe that is the main challenge for Hono OpenAPI with all these new validators coming in. And regarding your second question, like how do we create libraries around multiple runtimes? That is something like I guess Hono has sort of a function which can help you identify the runtime that you're on, which is not perfect. I would say like it does sort of have some gray areas. I'm not sure. I haven't checked it for quite some time, but what it gives you is like, okay, are you on the workers system or are you on Node.js or things like that? So it can just give you a starting point so that you can just import only those libraries which are sort of required. But I do sort of face that problem in the Hono rate limiter because I have to create a Cloudflare version separately than the main one. Yeah. Because those specifics on that will only work in the Cloudflare ecosystem. So if you're using it outside of it, so if you want to like sort of use the durable object outside of like the Cloudflare runtime, you cannot do that. So that's a basic problem with that.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. So wait, what I heard from that is you're just very busy.
Yeah. I do feel that lately I'm not able to sort of contribute enough in the ecosystem lately. But yeah, I guess it's more about like people are liking what I've created. And the best part is like every week I'm getting some new issues around the problems that they are facing, and it's kind of improving the whole like project itself. And that's the best part of open source in general. Like when you share like sort of project and everyone like was having this problem and they get around this and they kind of like, you know, help you with the PRs and the issues in any way that's possible. Like I've seen some people helping in the Discord with the Hono OpenAPI. I'm like, wow, like that's happening automatically. That's nice. But yeah, that's a good feeling as well as like a great thing. Like that just says like open source is so much successful. Like if you're building these projects, there are people who can help you manage these stuffs.
I mean, it's also like linking back, like Brad started asking questions in the Hono Discord. You might have been the first person answering him, and now Brad also can answer questions in the Hono Discord, helping others, right? So,
yeah,
like, you know, the journey always starts with the first question you ask in one community, and then you slowly dive in, and maybe at one point you are the one answering then.
Exactly, that's the beauty of it. But yeah, like I really need to spend more time in the Discord. That's a note for me.
Well, so I do recognize someone in the comments from Discord. Well, he works with us as well, Aristo, aka Amber Gristle, and he did have one more question. I'm sorry if this is like we're backtracking a little bit to when we were talking about response typing, but he had a question about. Okay, he said the lack of response awareness in Hono middleware typing is a known issue. He also says hi, and he's wondering if you are aware of any any traction on Hono itself for addressing that that lack of response awareness. So knowing what the response is going to be in middleware typing. I think we talked about this a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. This is I'm going to bandwagon this question as well. So like, first question is his question. Are you aware of any discussions happening around that? Second question is my question. Like, where do these discussions happen for Hono? You're probably the closest to the project of anyone we know. So I am, as someone has ideas about, oh, okay, wouldn't it be neat in Hono if we could blank? Where do those conversations happen?
Honestly, like most of the conversation happens on GitHub issues and discussions all together. And like if you just follow Yusuke is always there to sort of share all the hot issues going on or the hot PRs going on around the Hono ecosystem. So that's a great way to get to know like, okay, what's happening in there. And so you never feel like left out. So there's no FOMO effect of it there. But usually like if you have an idea, you can just raise an issue over there and we discuss over there only. So everyone comes around like sort of like how we can improve this, or if you can send a reproduction so that we can also understand this issue. So like it's not like we are doing this secretly on a private chat on Discord or anything like that. It's totally public for everyone to get into it. And like that's the best part of Hono.js, honestly. Like it's truly welcoming for everyone with like whatever level of background they have, like are they entry-level engineers or mid-level engineers or senior engineers. Everyone can join the conversation, try to figure out like how we can solve this the best way possible and just create the PR for it. That's it. And yeah, that's all. There's nothing really happening behind the scenes. But yeah.
We just get 100% in the chat, so someone is actually confirming.
Echoes from the chat on the quality of the community. Yeah, I think that's something that everyone experiences when they kind of like try it out. Okay, that might be as good of a note. I mean, that was an excellent speech, and that might be as good of a note as any to start wrapping up.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, Brett, I'm still interested because you said you want to ask that one question that is related to one of the first questions you ever asked in the Hono Discord, and Aditya answered that.
Yeah.
Oh, which one was it?
It was the one about like, okay, how do you manage surface area of like 5 different validation libraries multiplied by 5 to 10 runtimes.
Okay, I didn't know that was related to your question that you had once in Hono. So
yeah, that was, I asked my question, but I guess I do have a good kind of like final question. It's in the category of what I like to call magic wand questions. I could do 2. Okay, well, I guess the easy one is you have a magic wand, and you can rename Hono Zod OpenAPI. In order to reduce confusion talking about Hono and OpenAPI, what would you rename it to?
I love that question because I said literally I'm confused all the time.
I truly don't have an answer to that because for me it's not confusing, but like I get it, like many new people coming in, like so it was funny, like there was an issue on the Hono middleware repo regarding Hono OpenAPI, and Yusuke like this project isn't here. So
yeah, it's not
create that over there. Like, Aditya, please sort of look into this. And I'm like, yeah, that's something like you can say like maybe there is a confusion, or maybe my project is quite successful. Like people are directly creating issues over there. So there's both the things happening.
Yeah, I thought it was nice that your project is on the Hono docs now. So that's that shows that like it solves a real need. Like there are like Hono.dev has the Hono OpenAPI, not Honozod, or also has Honozod OpenAPI.
Has both
the Hono both of them. Like I actually, it's kind of interesting that the package is kind of gaining a lot of traction lately, and the Zod one is kind of in the middle of like there is a lot of issues in the Zod OpenAPI. Like I've seen like a lot of issues even shared by Yusuke over there, and I'm not saying like Hono OpenAPI is perfect, compared to Hono's OpenAPI, because that is like a dedicated framework built around to do that. Hono OpenAPI is more like, how you can quickly and dirty, like you can just get that thing done. So like you can get the OpenAPI specs, which is really nice to have. Okay, so maybe you have some areas which is not perfect. You can just create an issue, and I'm happy to look into it. So it's really in the quite early stages. So I don't think so there is a chance for me to sort of rename the Hono's OpenAPI till now. Maybe in the future I might use that.
Well, it's the magic wand question.
Just hold on to that for me.
Okay, I guess final question, another magic wand question, but this one's a bit more practical. So this one relates to if there's any patterns you've seen of like questions asked or issues raised for Hono OpenAPI that you kind of wish you could just call something out to before people start working with it.
You actually helped me with that. So there was a lot of questions regarding why do you created this? Why is Hono OpenAPI there? Like I'm like just explaining it. Like when I did that launch post on Twitter, everyone was like, why does this exist? We already have Hono's OpenAPI. And I'm just explaining everyone, okay, so this is a very different approach. This solves my problem. And maybe that is something that you don't have. That's totally fine with me. But this has a different approach to solving that same problem and all that I'm explaining. And like there are like 2-3 issues on the repo also regarding that, and there's a discussion also. I'm like, okay, this is really getting out of hand, and I have to create a video regarding this, and you guys just help me with that.
All right,
explaining all that over there.
We're gonna keep shouting. We'll shout from the rooftops of Berlin and Amsterdam. It's for incremental adoption.
That's nice. So that was like the truly main issue that I get recurringly. But thank you guys.
Yeah, great.
I mean, thank you for joining.
Yeah, seriously.
That was super insightful. I guess we are on the half hour, and we said initially we are not streaming longer than half an hour. So I will end the stream now for the audience. Let's see, Brad, you have an outro jingle?
Oh, yeah, sorry.